Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Now, I've been doing some lists, some talks about the intersections between classical music and film music. Really a fascinating topic, really. And so far, we've done lists of great film scores by film score composers, primarily, and also great film scores by classical music composers. But one of you suggested, and it was a wonderful suggestion, a brilliant suggestion, thank you so much for the suggestion, that I do a talk on classical music used as film scoring. And so I said to myself, sure, why not? So I picked 10 of the very best, essential classical masterpieces, all of them, which were actually used in films. Now, I was very careful in making up this list to use non-diegetic music. That is not, music used in the film because someone's listening to it. Like, for example, the Boccherini Minuet, the really famous one, do 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 do, that thing. That's in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but it's because that's the music that's playing in the scene. That is the characters in the movie actually hear it. No, that's diegetic music. When music is being used within the context of the film and the people are responding to it, or it has something to do with the movie itself. I wanted to use only classical music that's used in a non-diegetic way. That is, it's the accompaniment that the people in the film are not able to hear, but we are as viewers of the film, and it adds to the tension, the excitement, the color, the atmosphere, whatever it's for, of the scene. And so that was really a fun thing to do. And here are 10, oh my God, they're all masterpieces that you should know, and they're all used in films, somewhere or other, in some way or another. First, Mendelssohn's Symphony No. 4, his Italian symphony, da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. It's just a wonderful tune. It was used in the movie Breaking Away. I just remember people riding bikes. It's wonderful music to ride a bicycle to. Absolutely fabulous. It beautifully fits the scene. And that's the point with all these examples. They have to fit the scene that we're discussing. So Mendelssohn's Italian Symphony for sure. Number 2, Bizet, of course, the Carmen Suite, especially the opening. I got that first cymbal crash in a little early there, sorry. Anyway, that was the Bad News Bears. And again, the choice was perfect. It was inspired because in the opera, that's the music for the bullfight. It's, the festive day when the bullfight's going on in the arena and the crowd's cheering and all that stuff. Well, this is Bad News Bears. It's about Little League baseball games. So it's a perfect use of that music. Number 3, the Prokofiev Romeo and Juliet suites, particularly the death of Juliet, which is used to depict the destruction of the Starship Enterprise in Star Trek III. The Search for Spock, or something like that. That film score is by James Horner. Now, I think James Horner was a terrible movie music composer. I disliked most of his stuff. And one of the things I disliked about him is that he simply stole things. A lot of film music composers were inspired by the classics, and some even borrowed rather shamelessly. But Horner really borrowed shamelessly, and not always, I think, in a particularly effective way. But in this particular case, there's this gripping scene, a screaming, wrenching scene of utter despair at the death of Juliet. And Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, it goes, ya da 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 da. It's very, very despairing. And it sounds a heck of a lot better than what I just did. And he uses that as the Enterprise flames out and gets completely messed up. And first time I heard it, the reason I never liked the way James Horner uses these things is it's one thing to use the Mendelssohn or the Bizet, and it's Mendelssohn and it's Bizet, and it doesn't matter because it fits the film. But the problem with what Horner does is that he has his original composition, and then into it, he just slots in whatever he happens to be stealing in little snippets. So it's extremely disconcerting. You're watching the Enterprise. It's the Enterprise that's blowing up. It's flaming out. It's fabulous special effects. There's all kinds of noise and commotion going on. And you have his original score. And then all of a sudden, you hear Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. And for most people watching the movie who don't know Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, it doesn't make any difference. But for me, I'm watching the Enterprise get tanked, and all of a sudden I go, holy crap, it's Romeo and Juliet. What the hell is that doing there? Oh, it's just irritating. But he uses it, and I thought I'd point that out so you'll know where it comes in. Next, Rossini, the Overture to the Thieving Magpie, La Gazza, Ladra. This is in one of the most iconic scenes of A Clockwork Orange, which is Stanley Kubrick, of course, who used classical music everywhere. And he uses it in both ways because, the main character, Mr. Droog, whatever his name is, the crazy psychopath, is a classical music aficionado, particularly Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which I'm not wearing a tie because it's in a movie. I don't have to. So, that music occurs everywhere. But he's actually listening to it. In this particular case, he's not listening to it. It's just the movie which Kubrick uses to depict a really horrifying scene of robbery, abuse, and murder in a wealthy woman's house. And you may recall it, but it is so perfectly timed and judged. The music is fabulous in that moment because it's, of course, comic music. And what's going on is just horrifying. And it's perfectly timed and in rhythm with what the music is doing. It's extraordinary. Absolutely genius scene. And use of Rossini's music, he would have been horrified. Or maybe not. You never know. Howard Hanson, Symphony No. 2, the Romantic Symphony. Now, this was a controversial pick. This was used at the end of Alien, when the alien's been zapped out and everything's okay. And, Jerry Goldsmith, the great, great, great Jerry Goldsmith, wrote the original film score to Alien, some of which was used in the film. But for that particular scene, the director, Ridley Scott, insisted on using the Howard Hanson Romantic Symphony, which infuriated Jerry Goldsmith and has infuriated movie music fans ever since. Does it work? I don't know. I mean, I kind of like what Jerry Goldsmith originally wrote. You can get his original score for Alien, but the Hanson Romantic Symphony, of course, is lovely, and it I think sort of gave Ridley Scott what he wanted in terms of, the horror is over, and now it's all peace and ease and mellowosity. So he chose Howard Hanson's Romantic Symphony. Why not? I mean, it's the director's choice ultimately, isn't it? Next, Mahler, Symphony No. 2, the Resurrection, the finale. The actual chorus, the resurrection chorus. It's an extraordinarily strange use of this in the Michael Cimino film, The Year of the Dragon. Remember The Year of the Dragon? I mean, it's just a crazy movie about a crazy cop who's fighting drug lords in New York's Chinatown, and his wife gets murdered. He's at his funeral. And I remember vividly also watching this movie and thinking to myself, where's that music coming from? I know that. I know that. What is it? He's at the funeral, and all of a sudden Mahler's Second is going on in the background. It's a little unclear whether that's diegetic or not. I mean, it's non-diegetic music. I think it's probably safe to say that, he's at a funeral or whatever, but they're not playing Mahler's Second Symphony for that reason. And because it occurs in other non-diegetic kind of formulations, as the movie goes on. But there it is, Mahler's Second. I mean, that was a shocker. That was really a shocker for me. And next, let's see. Oh yeah, Elgar, Symphony No. 1. The Symphony No. 1 by Elgar has this enormous motto theme that pervades the entire symphony, and finally comes back in triumph at the very end. But it is the very essence of late Victorian Edwardian England, the country manor, the estate, that kind of stately nobility It's an amazing theme, actually. It is so of its time and place. And when Greystoke, remember when he goes to England, the legend of Tarzan, he's trying to adapt to civilized life, which isn't working terribly well. And he has this estate, and that's the music that you hear. And it's absolutely unforgettable. Elgar Symphony No. 1. In Greystoke, the legend of Tarzan, of all things, but it is perfect. Absolutely perfect in its place. And that's, sort of characteristic of all these things. Even Mahler, too, is very, very good in its place. It's just that it was Mahler, too. And I was like, okay, that was unusual. Next, another Kubrick, because Kubrick's stuff is just marvelous that way. Bartok, the music for strings, percussion, and Celesta in The Shining. Oh, music for strings, percussion, and Celesta is one of the scariest pieces of music ever written anyway. It is spooky, really spooky, and it's perfect for things like buckets of blood running down the elevators and coming through the hallways. I mean, I was recently driving around looking at property, and we were on Overlook Avenue in West Haven. And, it's the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. And all I could think of was Bartok's music for strings, percussion, and Celesta. It really was absolutely perfect. It's an amazing piece of music, an incredibly atmospheric piece of music. And once you hear it, you will never be able to get it out of your head. I mean, you'll see The Shining and all that creepy imagery. It was marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. Next, Sibelius. Finlandia in Die Hard 2. Now, Finlandia, it permeates the entire film, usually just the first two notes, which sound a lot like the opening of Jaws. It's just, yadum, yadum, like that. There's lots of menace in it. And so that you hear all the time. And then you don't get the big tune, or one of the big tunes, until the very end, when all the planes are finally landing, the bad guys blow up, and then it's going dum ba da da dum bum 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 ba do 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 do, all the happy stuff comes in at the very end. But it's actually very cleverly worked into the fabric of the movie. You don't really realize until quite a ways in that you're actually dealing with Finlandia. And then finally the whole thing erupts, and it's just, I prefer to consider that film as a Fantasia on Finlandia rather than one of the Die Hard franchises. But it was really very, very cleverly done. And finally, last but not least, some animated stuff. It's the Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown. Of course. All the Charlie Brown things have the Vince Guaraldi trio doing, most of the music. It's, jazz stuff, and it's marvelous. But Schroeder, of course, is always playing Beethoven piano sonatas and whatnot. And in this particular case, the Easter Beagle is represented by the first and second movements of Beethoven's Seventh. The second movement when he is sad, and the first movement when Easter happens and he's twirling around with his little Easter basket and thingies, and, and it's doing the first movement of Beethoven's Seventh. It's a lovely, lovely use of the Beethoven, I think. And I particularly enjoy seeing, classical music in animation, because you get to really adapt the animation to the actual music, and it works very well. We all know Fantasia, and then there was the film Allegro non troppo and things like that, where, those are movies about classical music being animated. But as I said, in this case, I was just looking for classical music used as real film music. That is, as appropriate music for the scene and the plot and the characters and everything that's going on in the movie. And Beethoven's Seventh has popped up in quite a few films, actually. It also was the climax of The King's Speech, the second movement of Beethoven's Seventh. Actually worked quite well there as well. But I think it was just wonderful. And it's the Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown. So there you have 10 fabulous films, or important films, major films. Some of them are better than others, and I'm not going to get into the film criticism part of it. That's not my gig, so I don't deal with that. But the music, aha! You have 10 absolutely essential masterpieces that all beginners should get to know, that were actually used in those movies as regular, normal, everyday, average film music, and quite well. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.